Yeah, welcome all. Hello, Simon, Judith, Keith, Jeremy. Hello, Palden, Duncan, Shirenamala. Just wait for the others to appear. So, Christine, Sanyu, and Dilly, welcome to you. Okay, so Grace. Yeah, hello, Fene. Sorry, just dealing with a couple of settings here at my end. Okay, here we are then. So what I will do, I will, oops, share screen. Uh-oh, something gone wrong here. Come on. Okay, share screen. Is it playing me up? As soon as I press the share screen, it's mucking me about. Okay, can you see a trampoline? Welcome, Orca.
Yeah. Well,
You can
hi.
see a trampoline. Okay,
Yes.
you're meant to
Yes.
see something far more significant than a mere trampoline. Now can you see my iPad?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Let me now call up the text we were dealing with. Sutta. Yeah, well, sorry, I don't know whether I'll ever totally overcome this technological pantomime we seem to have at the beginning of each session, but okay, here we are then. I think we're set. Oh, Paladin, is your boat back in the water?
We are back in the water, yes.
Okay, right.
Thank you.
So last time round, we were looking at the Mangala Sutta. We got to the end of line 1, but I'll just read it through again slowly, and we shall come back into it. Garavo chanivato chasanturti chakatanyuta kalena dhammas savanam etam mangalamuttamam. So last time round, we finished the first line. Garavo, from the root garu, or the word I should say garu, the adjective garu meaning heavy, means attaching weight to something. Garavo, attaching weight to something, treating it with the gravitas that it deserves. Our English word gravitas, of course, from that same origin. And nivato, being kind of down under the wind, not sticking your head right up into the most prominent position, being a little bit being a bit lower, and it comes to mean generally humility, but the idea is, keeping your head lower. As you'll be aware, of course, in many Eastern cultures, respect is shown by keeping your head lower than the senior person now. Santuti Katanyuta, contentment, and Katanyuta, Katanyu. So I was explaining last time, Kata, Sanskrit, Krita is done, just as a past participle, and therefore that which has been done. If you are katanyu, you are done knowing, literally means you have a recognition of what has been done for you. And so that has come to mean it's the equivalent of gratitude in English, but the specific meaning of an awareness or an acknowledgement of what has been done for you. Now we go to the second line. Kalena dhamma savanam etam mangalam uttamam. Kala means time, but specifically, mostly it means time in duration, but also it can have the meaning of, particularly in an adverbial sense, of doing something at the right time. Welcome, Teresa. And for example, if a monk is not allowed to eat, or if a monk is eating kind of in the evening or something, a Theravada monk, I mean, in breach of the Vinaya and the rules about when you can eat, he's eating akale, literally at non-time, meaning at an improper time. Akale. Let me just call up the. So we have kala, oops, time. With the negating prefix akale. So now we've got the locative here, literally at non-time, which is the Pali way of saying at an improper time, at an incorrect time, not at the right time. You can also use it in the instrumental, kalena, which would mean at an appropriate time, at the right kind of time. And that's what we see here. Kalena Dhamma Savanam. Hearing the Dhamma at an appropriate time. Savana, it's from our root shru, meaning to hear, and it makes a verbal noun shravana in Sanskrit, and as normally savana in Pali. And we have here Dhamma Savana. Note the doubling of the S there. It's a very, very common phenomenon that you'll see between Sanskrit and Pali, where you get a Sanskrit word beginning with a consonant cluster, that's two different consonants coming together. So a shra, shravana in Sanskrit. The shra becomes just a simple s in Pali. And when it starts a word, of course, it starts itself just with that single S, because a word can't begin with a double letter. However, when the word now is compounded with a preceding word, dhamma savana, dhamma hearing, or hearing the dhamma, listening to the dhamma, this is by linguistic memory, this shra now makes itself reappear, because in Sanskrit we dharma shravana. The Pali now allows itself to double that S because it can, because of the preceding short vowel in the compounded word, dhammasavana. So that will account, I think, for pretty much every instance you see of a word well, which on its own begins in a single consonant, so it begins with a single consonant, as in savana, but in compound, that consonant doubles. You might say, why is it doubling in a compound with a preceding word? And that is all, I think I might be right in saying it's always the answer, but it's certainly almost always the answer. Go back to see what it was in the Sanskrit, and it is Shravala. Um, and from that root, just on this, we have the past participle shruta, regularly formed, just add ta to the root. That's in Sanskrit, and in Pali, as we know, sutta. Evam me suttam, thus by me heard. So shrutam in Sanskrit, suttam in Pali. Note, because there's a potential confusion here, there is a separate Sanskrit root, not shru, which is to hear, but sru, which means to flow. And that makes that which flows, a sruta in Sanskrit, something that flows, namely a stream, which in Pali becomes sutta, which we see in that well-known expression, sotapanna, like one who has achieved the stream, which we commonly translate as a stream enterer, one who has kind of entered the stream of the teaching and is on his way to arahantship. So remember, these roots are clearly distinguished in Sanskrit, one with the shra, the other with the sra, but the distinction becomes blurred in Pali. Just be alert that they are two separate words. And from this savana, of course, as we know, we've got the one who hears, a hearer, a listener, is a shravaka in Sanskrit. Oops. And so one who hears, one who listens, and by extension it means a disciple, because you are listening to the teachings of somebody, and that is what, again, as we would expect, shravaka in Sanskrit becomes savaka in Pali. And most of you may know the chant, Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho. That's the Savaka Sangho, the Sangha, the community of listeners, literally. That means the community of disciples or followers of hearers. So that gives us Galena, what that explains, Galena Dhammasavanam. Galena at the right time, Dhammasavanam. Literally, Dharma, hearing, Dharma listening, hearing Dharma talks in a timely manner at an appropriate time. So in a moment, we shall pass on to the recitations. But before we do so, I can deal with any queries or doubts, or indeed comments. Or if any of you want to point out any error in what I have done, please do so. Have you got an error to point out, Jeremy? Please go ahead.
No, not at all, James. Not at all. No, it's a query, quite a simple one. Is there a difference in pronunciation between sawana and then dharma sawana, where you put a double S in? Do you hold the S for longer?
You do, and in fact, it's very distinctly held. So the word on its own, savana on its own meaning hearing, you say dhamma savana. If you said dhamma savana, you'd be understood, but it would be it would be wrong. So you do have to hold that double S, dhamma savana. And remember also on this point that the script, and whichever script you use, and the Roman script is just as good as any for Pali and for Sanskrit. The script is a faithful representation, intended as a faithful representation of sound. And so if you see a double letter, make sure you do hold it double. Just as, the word asta on its own, and we distinctly chant Namo Tassa Bhagavato, Namo Tassa, not Tassa. There's one interesting point arises out of this, and that is, has the way that Pali came to be written had a kind of a back effect, a retro effect on the way it was pronounced? I hadn't really considered that point until this very moment, I think, because to go back to the broader point, within the culture, the ancient culture of India, and I include the Sri Lanka there, within that ancient culture, the script was completely, what script you use was completely unimportant. The only criterion, and I mean the only criterion for a good script, was that it accurately represented the sounds. Now, this is an ancient belief, and going back, or an ancient principle, I should say, going back to Vedic times, because among the Brahmins, it was regarded as critically important that the Vedas should be pronounced and chanted exactly correctly. And that was what the oral tradition handed down. For a long time, the Brahmins as a community were resistant to having it written down at all, for fear that it would fall into the wrong hands, because it was meant to be secret knowledge. In fact, the word Veda literally does mean knowledge. But ultimately it was written down, and the main criterion for the script, in fact, the Devanagari script that we now see Sanskrit written in, didn't come into existence until about something like 1,500 years after the death of the Buddha, and well after the Vedas were composed. There had been another script, the Brahmi script, before that fell into disuse, and there may have been other scripts. And the point is that what marks you used on paper or palm leaf or stone or whatever to write something down, it didn't matter at all, provided it accurately represented the sound. Now, as time went on, people got used to seeing the Sanskrit represented in whatever script was used, now mostly the Devanagari script, which conveyed with great accuracy. Hello, Dilly. Would you like to mute? I think it's you.
Yes.
Okay. If
Yeah.
you can mute, Dilly, there's a conversation going on there.
Yeah. I just want to add, it's very helpful. This class has been very helpful for me, because now I do understand, like on verse 8, Anavajjani Kammani is Karmani in Sanskrit.
Sorry, in verse 8 of the Mangala Sutta, you mean?
Yeah, Anavajjani Kammani is Karmani. So there are so many words like that. Now that makes sense compared to Sanskrit and Pali, then it's easier for me to understand now. I didn't understand it before the same way. So thank you so much. Thank you very much.
I'm really, really pleased to hear that it's working. It always delights me when I hear my students, when by what they say, I really see that they've got it.
Yes. Now it's that got it feeling is there.
So
yes.
I could say Anyasi Dilli, like that wonderful phrase, when Kondanya, when the first sermon given by the Buddha to his Panchavagya, to the group of five, and Kondanya got it. And Kondanya said, Yang kinchi samudaya dhammang sabbantan nirodha dhammang. whatever has the nature to arise has the nature to pass away. And then the Buddha realized that was the first time that by his words somebody else had reached arahantship. And you can hear him say, Anyasi kondanya. Anyasi means he got it. Anyasi kondanyo. Kondanya's got it. That's why he became then to be known as Anya Kondanya. Kondanya who got it. Simon, please.
Yeah, it kind of occurs to me that if the Dhamma, the preservation of the Dhamma, was so dependent upon recitation, given that there was virtually no other way in that time and in that climate of recording stuff, writing on leaves as opposed to writing on vellum or parchment or something.
Mm.
Had the Buddha not arisen in India at that time, then we would be unlikely to have received anything from him. It only persisted as a teaching because people were prepared to do the recitation, which was originally a Vedic thing.
That's right. Do you know, one feels inclined to say, well, what a narrow miss, or had it been foreordained in the universe for eons in advance? But the answer is, looking at it purely from our temporal standpoint, if the Buddha had given his teaching in an area where they didn't have this very strong culture of oral recitation, then it's I would say highly likely that certainly a huge amount of it would have been lost, and possibly nothing may have been preserved at all. Equally, of course, he may have been taught in a culture where it was normal to write things down. For example, among the Jews or the Greeks, where they did regularly write things down, or in Phoenicia, or indeed in China. But yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, Sam. A bit of a near miss that he taught in a culture where things were not written down. But equally, happily, sufficient importance was attached to it by his listeners. To say, okay, well, they didn't even think of writing. They thought, oh, this is worth remembering, and so they did. But so many near misses in the history of the universe, aren't there?
Well, I mean, even in terms of ancient Greece, there are loads of philosophers of about the same time or a couple of hundred years after. I don't know what they recorded stuff on, presumably some kind of parchment, but all we've got is a few fragments. So we're kind of guessing and trying to put together what lots of Stoics and pre-Socratic philosophers thought based upon a few lines that we have to fill in the details.
Yes, that's an interesting point. They would have recorded on papyrus, of which the art of papyrus making, I think, arose in Egypt, but had spread to Greece. That's an interesting point. Maybe that was a value judgment at the time that people thought the teachings of Socrates and Plato and so on, and the poetry of of Homer was worth recording, worth writing down, bearing in mind, of course, that it was a big effort to get it all written down, and some expense as well. So maybe it was just things that were thought worth recording by the people of the time were recorded, and others were just left to rot away.
Mm.
And for example, we know that there were numerous wandering philosophers at the time of the Buddha, preaching their various doctrines. Many of these are explicitly dealt with in the Digha Nikaya, for example, in Sutta number 2, where King Ajata Sutta enumerates the various philosophies he's heard only in a few lines each. But they're recorded only because they're recorded in the context of a Buddhist scripture. But here, in those cases, we have people whose teachings just have been lost, save to the extent that they are repeated by somebody else, but for the purpose of refutation. So we don't have their own words recorded. Again, it's probably the result of value judgment. You have people who say, "Wow, this is worth remembering." Goodness me, it's such a fascinating area for speculation.
And can I give us a little phonetic rabbit hole?
Please do,
Because I
Paula.
just found this was interesting. So in Tibetan, when the word Padma went into Tibetan, rather than taking the word phonetically and transliterating it as a word that would come out as Padma in Tibetan, they literally took the characters Pa, Da without the vowel, and Ma.
Yes.
Which, when pronounced in Tibetan, becomes Pema, which is why it's Pema, which I thought was interesting. Because they didn't always do that. Some words do get transliterated phonetically, but that one didn't.
That's right. In fact, in among the Tibetans, they were almost always translated. In fact, I think there's very little transliteration in Tibetan. They always preferred to translate. But with some phonetic mutations, particularly the one that you have mentioned, for example, if a vowel, an a before a d, written as an ad, would be pronounced in the Lhasa dialect as an e, the a becomes umlauted to an e, and the d either is not pronounced at all or comes out as a glottal stop. So that's right. So in Tibetan they would write padme, either padme or padme, but normally padme, I think. And then they would just exactly reflecting how it would be written in Sanskrit, but then it just gets pronounced in the Tibetan way.
And yet other words they seem to have transliterated more phonetically, which isn't, I can't think of one now, but then I know there are others. And yet others get translated. So Ananda, I was really happy to see Ananda is translated. I can't remember what it is, but it's whatever the Tibetan for joyful is, or with joy.
Okay, right. And of course, the word for Buddha, there's it Sanjay in Tibetan, so they wouldn't write in Thai and in Burmese. In Sri Lanka, they didn't give, well, Sri Lanka, they closely related to Pali anyway, but Thai and Burmese, unrelated languages, they would use the Pali word for it, whereas the Tibetans always almost invariably insisted on a proper translation. So anyway, back to the point I was making about script. Pali then gets written down originally in Sri Lanka about 400 years after the death of the Buddha. And it's written down in a certain way. Now, has the way it was written down then started to affect the way that we pronounce it? Because we know that when Sanskrit, Vedic and Sanskrit are written down, it's written in a form of script that accurately reflects the pronunciation. Now, back here then to Jeremy's point, when we read Dhammasavanam, we say, if that were Sanskrit, we would very distinctly pronounce the double S, Dhammasavanam. In fact, in Sanskrit, it would be Dharma Shravanam. But would that double S in that circumstance have been pronounced quite so distinctly in Pali? I fear, Jeremy, that is lost in the mists of time. My inclination is to say yes, but, I have to be aware of a possible, the value of my evidence might be slightly suspect there, because I have a bit of a vested interest in saying yes. The answer is we'll never know, but probably yes. But that doesn't matter too much because that's how everybody pronounces it now. So you'll hear the Sri Lankans and the Thais and the Burmese all pronouncing it as a full double Dhammasavanam, and of course people from the Ganges Valley translating it as chanting it would be written in the Devanagari as a double S, and they would all hear all pronounce the double S. So the answer is, can we be absolutely certain it was pronounced as a clear, distinct double S at the time of the Buddha? I think probably yes. We'll never. I mean, my bet is yes, but I can't honestly say we definitively know it. But what we do definitively know is that throughout the Theravada world now, it is so pronounced with a distinct double S. We can safely say it is. Yeah, Jeremy. Sorry. I mean, Simon.
Yeah, just to think that there are two processes going on now. One of them is we have audio, so we can listen to Thais, and as you said before, we can listen to Brahmins who are pronouncing the Sanskrit exactly as
Yes, yeah.
had we not had that, if we just had the written script and it had been passed over like Latin had in Christianity, within a couple of generations, we would be pronouncing it Michachara, wouldn't we? We would just change it according to the way in which um, English people would speak it. That process of corruption, of kind of the sound of it being corrupted, has been halted by, in essence, the internet.
Well, I don't think it would be correct to say that within India.
No, I mean across the world.
Across the world.
As I said before, the number of, if you speak to Americans and they're talking about Buddha.
Oh, goodness me, I prefer not with the Buddha. The Buddha said.
But if we just had the script, if it had just been, if we'd received the Nikayas, on vellum or something, and we just had scholars studying it, we would change the pronunciation according to the way in which we pronounce it in English, and it would have fragmented.
So it would have fragmented. And I'm sorry to put it in this way, but it would have fragmented but for the existence of people like me. And the reason I say that is that, when I started studying Sanskrit and Pali, that was, decades before even the word internet existed. So you did have the scholars in their ivory towers. And also, of course, remember at that stage, we did have a very good level of access to how these things were pronounced in India, and indeed in Thailand and Burma. So, for example, if you go back to when the Pali Text Society was established in the, it was 1870s, 1880s, whenever it was, there was a lot of high quality knowledge available of how it was pronounced. Because we were, although we didn't have recording devices, we had the scholars who were able to hear the Sri Lankan monks reciting, and Burmese and Thai monks reciting it. So although the accurate knowledge of pronunciation is much more widespread by reason of the internet, like the scholarly knowledge way before any electronic means was reasonably faithfully preserved.
You as a strong post standing against the currents of dissolution, then?
That's how I remember that to write on my gravestone, Simon. So yeah, I mean, I would say that the internet has certainly now taken away any excuse for not being able just to listen to real authentic chanting. So anyone can now hear how it's pronounced. Anyone can go onto the internet and listen now. But I would venture to say that the internet kind of made the knowledge widespread rather than preserve. It was preserved. It was preserved by the scholars, and even without any Western scholars, and the Sri Lankans and the Thais and the Burmese, for example, would still be chanting the scriptures in the way they'd always done, and the Indian Brahmins.
But I mean, if you think of it, you are to me an internet phenomenon. I've never met you. I mean, you could be AI for all I know. So it's only the fact that
Funny you should say that, because I've somehow wondered whether I am some kind of imaginary phenomenon. I think the Buddha kind of hinted to me that in fact, I might be. Yeah. Okay, then that was a really entertaining rabbit hole. Jeremy, please come in.
Yes, just in your notes on verse 9 on Katanuta.
Katanyuta, yes.
You say, well, the root is shna, so chanati. But I just wondered, how do you get to the suffix new? Because I was
Okay.
looking in the Pali Text Society under Janati, and I couldn't see. I may have just overlooked it, but I couldn't see a way of getting to that.
A way of finding new.
Yes, yeah.
Oh.
But I may be, as I say, I may be.
First, let me just quickly call up the PTS dictionary. Let me see if I can. Oops. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't give new on its own. If I'd been
It gives
writing,
lots of the other forms, doesn't it?
sorry?
It gives many of the other sort of grammatical forms.
Yes. Okay, so I just call up. So the word new on its own. So I'm just waiting for it to give me a full. Come on, give me the full script. Here we are. So Catania. Okay, it doesn't really explain about it though. I'll explain what happened though. So keep losing my iPad off the screen. Here we are. So as so often we can understand it by going back to the Sanskrit. So I'll just write it in Pali first. So iPad pencil playing up. There we are. So I think it's clear enough. We've got the root kri, to do, regularly formed past participle in Sanskrit krita, which by phonetic mutation becomes kata in Pali. So far, so good. We now have the root jña, meaning to know, cognate with, cognoscere, cognition in Latin, gnosis in Greek, and our English word to know. We write the K but don't pronounce it. Now, wherever we have a root ending in a long R, where we put that at the end of a compound, for example, omniscient, in Sanskrit, sarva jña, all-knowing. Although the root has a long R, jña, when it comes at the end of a compound, you write it with a short R, sarva jña, all-knowing. For example, also we see that in the root da, to give, dana, giving, or a gift. So gift giving, one who gives gifts, is a dana da, not a dana da, but a dana da. So the root da becomes a da at the end of a compound. Jña, jña, sarva jña. In Sanskrit, the word for grateful is kritadnya, done knowing. In other words, one who knows or acknowledges, recognizes what has been done. And in Pali, that would become a regular phonetic mutation, katanya. Back to the point of the doubling of the nya, which relates back to Jeremy's point that in Sanskrit we have a consonant cluster, transliterated as a J and a nya, and that accounts for the fact that when we look at the word in Pali, and so in Sanskrit, jnana in Pali is just jnana, but where a vowel precedes it, then it takes the opportunity to double itself in recognition of the fact that it was a consonant cluster. in Sanskrit. So Katanya, in several Pali words, it has departed from the Sanskrit form in changing the a to an u. And that seems to have a slightly emphatic meaning. It tends towards the emphatic meaning, as if it's part of your character rather than just a transient description. So if you have the character and the general inclination to be grateful, you're a person who in character exhibits and lives by gratitude, then that can explain the u, the slightly, not just katanya, so katanyu. The explanation I've just given is my own subjective view. I think I've seen a couple of people writing it in that way. You may not find that in the grammars. It's just a feel I have of this shift from a to u. So it's essentially the same word, but with the Pali altering the final vowel. So kritanya, Sanskrit, gatanyu in Pali. So I think I mentioned the notes. Yeah, matanyu, literally a measure knower, means somebody who acts in moderation, who does the right thing, not too much, who knows when to stop, is a matanyu, measure knower. But have we? I'm not quite sure whether we'd wound up all of the queries that have arisen. Is everything explained to the satisfaction of all? Please say if not. Right. So I think we've almost come to recitation time. I'll just read it through once more, and then we can have some recitations. So, Garavo Chanyavato Cha Santutti Cha Katanyuta Kalena Dhammas Savanam Etam Mangalamuttamam. And again, just remember this. I'll call up the. There we are. And just remember the Santutti, the final E. No, if you read this in prose, it would be a short E. In Sanskrit, it would be Santushti, Pali Santutti, with a short I at the end. It's like, as so often happens, the poet has lengthened that vowel just to keep the poetic meter. Santutti Katanyuta. So as I say, if this were written in prose, you'd see it written just in the regular form, Santutti, with a short E. Right. Simon, are you ready to kick off? You're first in my gallery.
Garavo cha nivato cha santutti cha katanyuta kalena dhamma savanang etam mangalamuttamam.
Yeah, can you just pronounce this pada once more?
Kalena dhamma savanang.
Okay, right. Very good. I don't know whether you noticed or whether you were kind of feeling that I was picking you up slightly on, but the double S was more pronounced on the second recitation than on the first. Okay. Thank you, Simon. Judith, we're around to you, if you please.
Okay. Gavarucha Nivatucha Santutita Katanuta Kalina Dhamma Sasavanam Itamangalam Uttamam.
Right, Judith. I noticed that you were exercising, quite rightly so, very great caution, and successfully so, in not, as before, pronouncing along cha, you see, garavo cha, nivato cha. As I've said several times, just hear the way in particular that Delhi and Sri Nimala pronounce the ch, and there's the short ch. You can, if Sri Lankan pronounces the ch, Northern India more of a ch sound. However, you kind of this major advance that you've made in the phonetics, you've carried a little bit too far, because for katanyuta it's pronounced as a long a. Santuticha katanyuta.
Katanyuta.
Okay, that's very good. Also, remember this a kalena, kalena. Exactly so. Yes. I'm delighted to see this rapid improvement in phonetics, Julie. It's almost as if you've come over a hump in the pronunciation. Excellent, thank you.
Oh, it's thanks to you.
Well, I am gratified. Thanks. So, Keith, round to you. You're still muted. Muted, Keith. Still muted. Your mute button has remained obstinately on.
I think I'm still with you. Yes, right. Daravo cha, Nevato cha, Santuti cha, Katanyata, Palena Dhammasavanang, Etang Mangala Muttamang.
Okay, very nice indeed. Excellent. Thank you, Keith. Palden, you're next on the screen.
Daravocha, Nivatocha, Santuticha, Katanyuta, Palena Dhammasavanam, Etam Mangalamuttamam.
Okay, can you do the second line again?
Palena Dhammasavanam.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Can you just say Kalena again?
Palena.
Okay, right. Again,
Kalena.
yeah. Also, I can see there's a general improvement in the way I'm talking about the native English speakers here. The native Sinhala speakers get it right anyway. To pronounce a word in English, pronounce a word beginning with a ka or a. For example, the English always want to make it like a p and a p. It's difficult for an English speaker correctly to pronounce gala. They tend to say kala, but gala. But you've got that right. I think I seem to remember at one point suggesting you should imitate Yorkshire speakers who do succeed in doing an unaspirated stop at the beginning of words. Anyway, again, good improvement. Thank you, Palden. Shrinimala, round to you, please.
Yes. Garavocha Nivatocha Santutticha Katanyuta Kalena Dhammasavanam Etam Mangalamuttamang.
Okay. Can you just say this word? How would you pronounce this Katanyuta?
Katanyuta.
Okay. How would you normally pronounce it in Sinhala?
Katanyuta.
Yes. Did everyone spot the difference?
No.
Okay. Because the Sri Lankans would probably themselves would probably not recognize the difference. It's a final short comes out as an in Sinhala, but more of an sound. But they're both very short. More of an for example, if the Northern Indian were pronouncing it. Now, a final long except in some circumstances, it's actually the Sri Lankans don't pronounce it long. They give it a different sound. They give it an open sound, but it's short. And you notice the first time that Sri Anamala pronounced that word, she pronounced it like a Northern Indian would, Katanyuta, Katanyuta. But the second time, Katanyuta, Katanyuta, not Katanyuta, no, Katanyuta. So it was pronounced
Because
with
it's long R.
you think it, you are pronouncing it short. You write it long in Sinhala, but it's pronounced actually short, but with an open sound. So you distinguish between and ah. Did you hear the difference between your two pronunciations of that word?
Yes, yes,
Ketanyuta, the
yeah.
Sri Lankan, the Sinhalas, we won't say Ketanyuta, Ketanyuta.
Katanyuta.
Yes, whereas in northern India, Ketanyuta, it would be held longer. But you write it as a long ah.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Shiranimala. Actually, what we'll do, and I'll jump back to you, Christine, but can we just go straight to Dilli? Now, can you read this one, Dilli, in the light of what I've just been saying about the final long, Katanyuta?
Yeah. Okay. Garavocha nivatocha santutti cha katanyuta kalena dhamma savanang etang mangalamuttamang.
Now, Dilli, are you aware whether you put this final vowel sound in? Are you aware whether you pronounce it in the native Sinhala way or in the pure Pali way? Which did you do?
Excuse me, because I'm learning Sanskrit, the Katanyuta should have gone higher, longer.
Longer, yes.
But, yeah, we got used to reciting it. Garavocha nivatocha santutti cha katanyuta.
Okay, right. So that's more of the Sinhala phonetics coming in.
Yeah.
So you pronounce it as an open sound, but quite short.
Yes.
Right.
But if I had to recite it in Sanskrit, I would have gone like Katanyuta.
Okay, you've well understood what's happening. You would find that the Northern Indians even reciting Pali, say somebody from the Ganges Valley, say a native Hindi speaker, with a Katanyuta with a long R. So just bear in mind that there's that slight difference in the way that the Sri Lankans pronounce it. It's a non-problem. I mean, everyone is pronouncing within their own tradition, but be aware when you hear a Sri Lankan pronouncing this Katanyuta, say, hang on, that sounds like a short ah to me. No, if they'd really been trying to do a short ah, they would have said Katanyuta, the sound, but Katanyuta is okay. We're getting there. Thank you, Andy Lee.
Thank you.
Christine, we're around to you.
Garavo Janivato Yasantuti Katanyuta Karena Dhammasavanam Etammangalamuttamam.
Can you just pronounce the first line again, or recite the first line again, Christine?
Garavo Janivato Yasantuti Katanyuta.
Okay, I don't know whether something's happening with the sound, but you've been or either that, or you've been so intent on pronouncing this short, rather, that I hardly heard it at all. You know, don't totally smother it. Nivato cha santuti cha.
Garavo cha nivato cha santuti Katanyuta.
Okay, thank you, Christine. That's right. Actually, I seem like making so many breakthroughs over the last week and today. Not a single person has mispronounced the cha as a cha, which the English speaker is inclined to do. Okay, very good. Thanks, Christine.
Being careful. Thank you.
Okay, good. Teresa, your turn.
Garavo cha niva cha santuti cha katanuta kalena
Katanyuta.
Katanyuta. Kalena Dhamma Savanam Etam Mangalam Uttamam.
Did you hear the Kalena? It's Kalena.
Kalena.
Kalena, right.
Kalena.
Again, because you were getting that long A there, correct. But again, you shorten it under the influence because, a pre-stressed vowel in English tends to lose its full quality. So it'd be natural for an English speaker to say Kalena, whereas you've got to say Kalena. Also, you were making, after all the discussion of the short cha, you were making it rather long. It was ingaro cha, nivato cha, as if you're pausing, but the pause is giving you a kind of excuse to lengthen the ah, which in English we would do, but never in Sanskrit and Pali. The cha is short and it remains short, and nothing will lengthen it, apart from Teresa on this occasion. So, so just we've got cha occurring 3 times here. So if you can just recite that line, but with special attention to make you can pause there. There's nothing stopping you pausing, but if you want to pause, don't, as it were, let the pause lengthen the ah. It's not garavocha, nivatocha, santuticha. You're allowed to say that. You can pause there. You can recite it, for the for effect in a poetic way. But as I said, don't let the pause mislead you into lengthening the ah. So can you just recite the first line again?
Garavocha, Nivatocha, Santuticha, Katanuta. Katanyuta.
Katanyuta. Okay, Santuticha Katanyuta. That was brilliant. That was just right, Teresa. So keep that one up. Very happy with that one. So Jeremy, we're on to you.
Garavo cha nivato cha santuti cha katanyuta kalena dhammasavanam etam mangalamuttamam.
Jeremy, you were doing the same with the cha. It sounded like having a cup of cha. And you just recite the first line again with special emphasis on keeping the cha short. You can either pronounce it as a cha as in northern India, or even a ch, which is how Shirinamala and Dili and Sinhala speakers would pronounce it. But the important thing is to keep it short.
Garavo cha nivato cha santuti cha katanyuta.
Okay, that was a lot better. Just say Santuti Chakatanyuta. Can you just recite just this pada? Santuti Chakatanyuta.
Santuti Chakatanyuta.
Okay, right. And again, it's a short u followed by a double to so santuti. It's a heavy syllable. Santuti. The u is short, but the syllable is heavy because it's got a doubled consonant. Santuti. Okay. Otherwise, you fall into the kind of trap that Americans commonly do when they talk about the Buddha rather than the Buddha. Okay, right. Thank you, Jeremy. And finally, we're round to Sanyu.
Yes. Garawocha Nivadocha Santoticha Katanyuta Kalena Dhamma Savanam Etam Mangalam Muttamam.
Okay, that was very nice, Sanyu, but can you just pay special attention to the lengths of the vowels in that first pada? Garavo, Chanivato, Cha.
Nivadocha Santoticha Katanyuta Da Kalena Dhamma Savanam Etam Mangalam Muttamam.
Okay, that was very good.
Thank you.
Can you just pronounce the way you did the Dhamma?
Like in Burmese way?
Okay, pronounce it. How do you think you pronounced it just now?
Dhamma Savana.
Okay, right. So what you were clearly doing there, you were correctly giving it the aspiration, because in Burmese you say Dhamma, whereas in Pali, Dhamma. The aspirated the, as we discussed before, it's not native to Burma, so you have to make a bit of an effort to do it, as indeed English speakers have to make an effort to do it. It's not native to English. But it came out of your mouth a little bit the way the Thais do it. So the Thais can't say the, so they'll say Thamma. It'll be like an the Thamma. And you were doing it slightly like that. I can understand why, but can you say Dhamma, Dhamma?
Dhamma.
That was a lot better. Just remember that the first time around you were veering slightly. You were clearly making an attempt, but going slightly towards the Thai way of doing it. But lean in the other direction towards India, Dhamma. Okay, very good. Thank you. So we can move on then to the back to the where. So I was just going to the Bhagavad Gita. I'm in the wrong class. We're in the Pali class. So if I'll take any further comments or queries on that, and then we'll move on to the Dandavaguru.
I don't see an app for that. You'll need to download one.
Did you hear that? That's the second time today my machine has just started talking to me in a most impertinent way without being asked. What made it do that? Anyway, there we are. The mysteries deepen as time goes on. Dandavaguru. So let me call up the. I have an uncomfortable feeling. No, that's slightly dishonest. I know damn well that my recordings have not kept pace with the pace of the class. So I haven't actually got round to recording chapter 10 yet. Chapter 10, I mean, making my video things of the Dhammapada. So that is high on the pile. Alas, too big a pile of things to be done, but I am highly conscious that needs to be done fairly soon. So Dandavaguru, the chapter on literally the stick, which is just generally means punishment. There's it seems likely that danda can actually be cognate to the Greek word dendron, meaning a tree. But basically the original meaning is a stick, and then by extension it has come to mean punishment. Rather in colloquial English, we talk about giving somebody stick. Incidentally, in the Devanagari script, this, like where I've highlighted here in the Devanagari, this upright bar at the end of a line is known also as a danda. It's just the word they use. We call it a full stop. They call it a danda, kind of stick, and there's a double danda at the end of that's at the end of one line of poetry, but the end of the verse, the two-line verse, you get a double danda. And if the verse has a number, you get the double danda, number, double danda as well. You've got four dandas to mark the end of the verse if you're using the number. But here, it is just means punishment. But by the way, we were talking about knowing the measure or being moderate or restrained. I forget where it appears, but there's a just judge or ruler or whatever. He's Dande Matanyu. He is Matanyu, a measure knower, Dande, in punishment. In other words, he doesn't excessively punish, like hands out fair penalties. Is Dande, literally in the stick or in respect of the stick, Matanyu, a measure knower. So restrained or moderate, measure knowing in the way that he hands out punishments.
We do talk about people being measured, don't we?
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's and in fact, I think that our word moderate was likely from that same root, and so speaking in a measured way, or restrained and carefully, or matanyu, knowing the measure. Also, have matanyu, particularly in the Vinaya, the monks being measured in how much they eat, and in Pali and Sanskrit, a measure knowing. So yes, I hadn't thought of that one, Paladin. So yeah, that's where our modern English then very exactly reflects the imagery of Sanskrit and Pali. So sabbe tasanti dandassa, sabbe bhayanti machuno, attanam upamam katva nahanaya naghataye. So sabbe, all, this is some sabba. Sabba can be used as, it means all, and the same as in English, it can be used with both a singular and a plural meaning. So this is the masculine nominative plural, sabbe, meaning all persons, everybody. And if any of you are still left wondering why is it sabbe and not sabba, that's because it's the pronominal declension. So the masculine nominative plural ends in e, not along a. For example, all the Buddhas, sabbe buddha. All sentient beings, sabbe satta. And here it's used without a noun, as we could in English. All fear punishment, all meaning everybody. So sabbe tasanti dandasa. Tas, Sanskrit tras, meaning to fear. It was in the Latin terreo, it was likely at an earlier stage terseo. So the rs in Latin, the rs, became a double r. And in modern Persian, to fear something is tarsinan, the root tars. So it's the same root as the Latin terra, but in Latin, the rs has become a double r. So all fear the stick. You'll see that it's a genitive there, and that's just normal with verbs of fearing, both in Sanskrit and Pali. Sometimes it takes the locative, but most frequently the genitive. Simon.
Is the tasanti, is that related to when we did the Metta Sutta about tasawa, tavara?
It is, yes, well spotted, because the tasa means fearful or timid. Tasava tavara, yes, it is.
So it's got the connotation of kind of trembling, weak and trembling.
That's right, you can fearful trembling, yes. And as opposed to tavara, which means stable and strong, facing up to the danger. So yeah, well spotted, Simon. I hadn't thought of that one. So sabbe tasanti dandasa. All are afraid of the stick. Sabbe bhayanti machuno. All fear death. Tasanti, Bhayanti, essentially the same meaning. Bhayanti is a much more common word, but it is essentially the same meaning. The Bhayanti, in fact, it's slightly irregularly lengthened to Bhayanti in Pali, Bhayanti with a short A in Sanskrit. Verbal noun Bhaya, from which we get the well-known, quite common name Abhaya, meaning fearless. I think Dillian Nimala, is that used as a boy's name in Sri Lanka? Abhaya, Abhaya, yeah, meaning fearless.
We have a name
Yes.
Abhaya, but I don't know the.
Abhaya, we had a king.
Yeah, we
King
have
Abhaya.
Abhaya king there.
Yeah.
But
Fearless.
Abhaya meaning?
Yeah, it just means fearless. I think in
Fearless.
India,
Abhaya
in India as well, it's used as a boy's name. I mean, in fact, in Hindi, it's pronounced Abhay. They pronounce it in Hindi. So you will find that name in India among the Hindus. It's cognate with the English word fear, actually. So fearful, bhi is the root, bhiru in Sanskrit and Pali is fearful, and fear, our English word fear, is from that same root, and from the bhi comes into Greek as a pho, as in phobia. So fear, phobia, bhayanti are all from that same root bhi, meaning to fear. So sabbe bhayanti machuno. Machuno, just call up the iPad. There we are. Uh-oh, sorry, pressed the wrong buttons. Got off my iPad. There we are. So we've got the root mri, meaning to die. Latin morior, in English mortal. The Sanskrit for death, mrityu, because Pali doesn't have this ri vowel, so that's why in Pali it becomes machu, mrityu, machu, and it makes its genitive in Pali machuno, of death. So sabibhayanti machuno, all people fear death. So was that your hand going up, Jeremy?
Yeah, I just wondered, could it also be machusa in the genitive if it's a u, a masculine noun ending in u?
Yes, it could.
You referred to Perniola, but I haven't got. I don't have access to it at the moment.
Right. So does Perniola give that one? He jolly well should if he doesn't. Let me just check. What reference is it?
Well, you said paragraph 26 at page 32.
Page 32. I've got it right here. Yes. Yes, here we are. It is given. So, for example, taru is the paradigm that gives it. Taru, T-A-R-U, meaning a tree, and indeed cognate with our English word tree. So you can make its genitive either taruno or tarussa. So machuno or machussa. Both forms are permissible. Machuno, I think, is probably more common, but machussa would be equally correct. Oh, where were we? Oops. So we've just gone over 1 o'clock then, so I'll make a note then. We've got to the end of this line. Sabbe tasanti landassa sabbe bhayanti machuno. So what we'll do then, we'll wind up at this point, and we'll see you hopefully in a week's time. Okay, thank you all very much then. Thank you, Oka. Goodbye then. Goodbye.
James.
Thank you, sir.
Goodbye.
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 Thank you.